for Fredericton, Grand Lake, and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier has told the people of this province he's committed to putting New Brunswick first and creating a healthy economy by promoting New Brunswick businesses. Matter of fact, I remember in the campaign the Premier being very hard on contracts going to Quebec and other places outside New Brunswick. So if that's true, Mr. Speaker, can the Premier explain how it's possible that millions of dollars under their watch are leaving this province when local companies are producing goods and services, making reasonable bids on tenders, and yet are losing out on companies from outside New Brunswick, including companies like Solino and Leading Edge Geomatics?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks very much to the leader of the leader of the People's Alliance for the question. We're looking at this in every sector of how we're actually tendering, how we're actually awarding contracts. But more importantly, when we're out doing an RFQ or out doing looking at a project, how we can actually be more of a project that fits New Brunswick companies. But I would like to know the specific incidents that the leader's talking about, because every one of those incidents that we find, we can get under the hood and say, what happened here? And it causes us the opportunity to fix it. So while I'm not familiar with those particular projects, if indeed we have been unfair to our companies in this province, I am committed to changing that game, because I want the game of New Brunswick businesses being awarded for contracts and being awarded for things that are done here in New Brunswick by New Brunswickers. So let's talk about those specific contracts, let's look at it, and let's work together to figure out what happened, and I assure you we'll fix it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Fredericton, Grand Lake, and leader of his party.
Mr. Speaker, I know that during the campaign, again, the Premier campaigned hard on not allowing businesses in New Brunswick to be, out of business while we give contracts to people and companies outside of New Brunswick. Of course, there's interprovincial trade laws. Of course, there's parameters in place. But my question is, what is this government doing to change those parameters to give an advantage to New Brunswick companies? We cannot continue to see New Brunswick companies losing bids to companies in Quebec and other places around Canada in this country. So will this Premier give us some idea of what they are doing to change the interprovincial trade laws to make sure New Brunswick companies come first when it comes to bids and tenders?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you for the question. And Mr. Speaker, we started very early on identifying where some of the shortcomings were. And one of the examples is in terms of Quebec, is that, we have 12 certifications in our trades. Quebec has 38 or 40, somewhere in that range. And what that means is a whole lot more people can work in New Brunswick than work in Quebec. And the question that we've had already in relation with other companies is some of the big projects. We've tendered projects that are too big, or they require a bond that's too big for companies that are working in New Brunswick. So we're not allowing them to join forces in New Brunswick in our own contracts, in our own tenders. So I recognize that, but there also have been some wins. And some wins in relation to, we have looked at the border issue, but we've also, in terms of the salt contract. The idea around salt here in New Brunswick only made sense, Mr. Speaker, that we actually mine salt and put it on our own roads. But it could have been a whole different process. But no, we said we have something here, we want to work with the company to make it work. So there's more to do, and I want to work with all members to make it happen, but we are working in DTI under the hood of every contract.
Mr. Speaker, New Brunswick companies are bidding on government tenders and are losing out on those government contracts, even though their bids are not far off the mark from, or even less than the winning bids. Often winning bidders are companies from other provinces and countries. Solino is a stormwater pipe manufacturing company which has existed in the Macadam since 1994. It is a major employer in the village with 30 employees. Three years ago, it won a 3-year contract under the former Liberal government. Recently, it bid once again on another 3-year contract. Solino's bid was less than 7% over the bid awarded to the U.S. company-owned ADS. It doesn't even have a manufacturing plant in the province. Instead, it has a culvert manufacturing plant in Quebec and a culvert storage yard in the Moncton area. The loss of the contract means nearly $719,000 will be leaving the province. Added to this is the negative impact on Howie Bird & Sons, the supporting company. Mr. Speaker, how is this putting New Brunswick and New Brunswickers first?
The Fredericton, Grand Lake, and leader of his party.
Mr. Speaker, I want to call attention to the fact that the government is sending millions of dollars out of the province by awarding tenders to companies in other provinces and countries, even though New Brunswick companies are bidding on these tenders and coming extremely close to the winning bid. Salino is only one example of many that are being severely affected by this practice. Also take Edge Geomatics, for example. It's the largest aerial map surveying company in North America right here at home. Many solar companies are also voicing their concerns and that they are being ignored when it comes to bids and contributions to solar energy in this province by giant international companies. A solar company in New Brunswick shared with us that they were not awarded the tender even though they had the lower bid. The bid was also awarded to a company in Nova Scotia which didn't even comply with the specified deadline requirement. More companies are coming to us with accounts of how they're overlooked and don't trust the bidding process. They feel there's no point in submitting bids. This is worrisome as these New Brunswick companies lose money, workers are laid off, and the province is poorer for it.
For Fredericton, Grand Lake, and Leader of Prosperity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The death of Amos Joseph Joe King occurred peacefully on Wednesday, April 24th, with his family by his side at the Dr. Everett Chalmers Hospital in Fredericton. Born on Thursday, May 29, 1958, he was the son of the late Amos and Rose King. Joe is survived by his sons, Jason King and William Colpitts, daughters Kate Colpitts, Alexa Stack Mills, Lauren Stack Mills, and Olivia Stack Mills. Sister, Marianne Matheson, special friends, Tracy Stack Mills and Brian Lacey. His canine companion, Miko, chosen son, Stephen Kemp, best friends, Kirk and Dixie Furlock, Jules and Paulette Faskel, several relatives and close friends. Joe played an important role in many people's lives. Young and old, he was influential in the sports community as a coach, mentor, and to many children as their bus driver for several years. Joe's family would like to extend a special thank you to the doctors and nurses of 3 East at the deck, especially his special nurse Leah and Pastor David Willison for his support, guidance, and presence in Joe's life. Hope the House to join me in remembering Joe.
The Minister of Justice and Attorney General.